Test. Testing.
So Frank, is it Loess Hills or Loess Hills? Or Loess Hills? I think yours is not Loess.
Okay, let's do it. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered among the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Omaha. It is good to gather together on a Sunday morning like this. Good to see familiar faces and new faces as well. I also wanted to begin by mentioning two members or participants in our congregation. One is Charlie McMahon. Charlie has been at the soundboard for the past several weeks and is slowly taking on that position, so thank you, Charlie. And Charlie wants me to mention that if the minister appears to say anything stupid, it's his fault and not mine. And secondly, I wanted to mention, I actually don't like to mention this, but the fact is that long-term member Barb Ross is in home hospice care. And probably the best way to communicate at this point would be on the Facebook page or by email or by calling or by sending a card. It's a difficult time for our whole church family. It's kind of the beginning of the church year, not quite, so I wanted to begin with a hymn, number 1 in your hymnal. Please stand and join us as we sing, "May Nothing Evil Cross This Door." We begin each Sunday with a story for all ages, and Kate Wigg will lead that story.
Good morning. Come on down to the front. Good to see you all. I saw Jonas somewhere. Are you being shy today, Jonas? It's all right. I would be too. So I think everybody has started their first full week of school now. I saw Aaron started this week. I see Aaron back there. So Council Bluff started as well. I had my first full week of school, and I'm tired. How about you guys? I don't know if you notice this. When I get really, really tired, sometimes I fight battles that aren't worth fighting. Have you done it? No one here has ever done anything like that, right? I was teaching on Friday, and I picked a fight that I had no reason to win, and I decided to have a battle for no reason, and in the middle of it, I was looking at the kid, and he was going to do this assignment the way I wanted it. And I finally said, "Dude, I don't even know why I'm fighting you about this." He said, "I don't know either." I said, "I'm going to let this go and walk away. Are you cool with that?" He said, "Yeah." So I walked away. But I decided to pick a story from Dr. Seuss that's about fighting battles that aren't maybe worth fighting, because it was totally what I needed this week. So this story is called The Zacks. One day, making tracks in the prairie of Prax, came a north-going Zax and a south-going Zax. And it happened that both of them came to a place where they bumped. There they stood, foot to foot, face to face. "Look here now," the north-going Zax said. "I say, you are blocking my path. You are right in my way. I'm a north-going Zax, and I always go north. Get out of my way now and let me go forth." "Who's in whose way?" snapped the south-going Zax. "I always go south, making south-going tracks. So you're in my way, and I ask you to move and let me go south in my south-going groove." Then the north Zax puffed up his chest with pride. "I never," he said, "take a step to one side, and I will prove to you that I won't change my ways if I have to keep standing here 59 days. He couldn't just go, Nope, that'd be doing too much, miss. That's what I hear a lot in class. "And I'll prove to you," yelled the south-going Zax, "that I can stand here in the prairie of Prax for 59 years. For I live by a rule that I learned as a boy back in south-going school. Never budge, that's my rule. Never budge in the least. Not a step to the west, not a step to the east. And I'll stay here, not budging. I can and I will if it makes you and me and the whole world stand still." Well, it seems logical, right? There wasn't any room around them to go either way. They could have done a leapfrog thing and both gone, no. I'm a problem solver. Well, of course, the world didn't stand still. The world grew. In a couple of years, a new highway came through, and they built it right over those two stubborn Zax and left them there, standing, unbudged, in their tracks. So this week, maybe we take some time to look at which fights are worth fighting and which fights we need to take a step to the east or a step to the west. Thank you very much. Would you two like to come and light the chalice? Come on up. Please rise in body or in spirit for the lighting of our chalice. Thanks, Eddie. Dude, I trust you. It's all you. You got this. He's got it. No burning. At times, our own light goes out.
Good morning. I'm Nellie Chenoweth. Woo. Hi. I am your worship associate this morning. Just got a couple of quick little announcements here. Pink sheets at the end of your pews. Please sign those. Let us know that you're here or not here. Also, yeah, well, Ann gets it. Ann knows. Also, after service today, we've got coffee hour downstairs in the common room. And if you're new or you're up for some conversation from us, feel free to take a blue mug. That lets us know that you're new, willing to talk to us. If you want to be introverted like the rest of us, take one of the nice, colorful mugs. Just a couple of things I'll highlight here on the green sheet. We got a couple things here. Blessing Bag Day on the 8th of September, Friday. If you can, come for a couple hours to help fill blessing bags, or if you have anything to donate or whatever, there's a list. Contact Kat in the office. Also, we have an all-church Frankfurter roast. It is not a picnic, it is a Frankfurter roast. We learned that from the Sneetches. But join us. That's going to be on the 16th, Saturday at Elmwood Park. Community night is coming up this Friday at 5:30. So come, it's a potluck, fun, all that fun stuff. Also, I'll just ask one more thing. If any of you have cell phones, now's a good time to silence them. And our own lovely Miss Carolyn McNamara has got an announcement to make. She's got to silence her cell phone first.
Good morning. In case you haven't noticed, today is Celebrate Hospitality Sunday. That's why you see green. My intent is to make this an annual event. It's a day to recognize and appreciate those who make our Sundays a little better and maybe a little easier. There are 9 hospitality teams who take turns welcoming visitors, giving you an order of service, making you a cup of coffee, and cleaning up after you after coffee hour. You can recognize them by their blue ribbons or maybe a green apron. If they don't mind standing, anybody who's on a hospitality team, if you're not too shy to stand, I think we'd all like a round of applause. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, and please join us downstairs for coffee and some lime green cake.
I was afraid she was going to forget to mention the cake. Okay, we'll have our offering now. Share the Plate beneficiary for the month of August is the Sienna Francis House, and our Change for Change beneficiary is Neighborhood Ministry. Our lesson today comes from James Baldwin. It has always been much easier, because it has always seemed much safer, to give a name to the evil without than to locate the terror within. And yet the terror within is far truer and far more powerful than any of our labels. The labels change. The terror is constant. And this terror has something to do with that irreducible gap between the self one invents. That's the self one takes oneself as being, which is a provisional self, and the undiscoverable self, which always has the power to blow the provisional self to bits.
What a playful piece of music. Thank you. I'm not really quite sure how to begin because it's been a while since I've been up here in this pulpit, and because I really want to share with you some images from our vacation. I've limited to 3 images that happened on the way back. Ann and I drove out with our dog to the San Francisco Bay Area this summer, and we had, the driving was difficult. It was a lot of driving, so these are 3 instances, moments on our way back, because they really lead to what I want to talk about today. The first, there's a backstory. The first night we stayed in Winnemucca, Nevada. I know that's everyone's dream, but here's how it happened. We the night before, well, I had seen for some time a motel room in Truckee near Lake Tahoe that was just beautiful, but it was $250 a night, and I wasn't quite ready to go there. But the night before we left, it was $100 for a night. And I thought, oh, this is going to be wonderful. I can't wait to get there. So we drove across the Central Valley, and it took forever. And in the process, we got an email confirming our reservation, but not mentioning that there was a dog. So I thought it would be safe and call, because what's that called? Trivago, it said that dogs were allowed. I called and confirmed that, and indeed they were not allowed. And so we canceled the reservation, and we felt confident that we could find a motel room or a hotel room in Reno, Nevada. But indeed, nothing. Every room in the city was taken. So we kept driving and finally got to Winnemucca. And there we found a motel room for $68. And it was way overpriced. The motel was largely populated by truckers and I think by migrant workers. Some of them were there for some time, so that outside many rooms there were actually charcoal grills, and about 5 or 6, when people got home from work, they took out the grills and started putting meat on them and then giving away beers, and everybody was having a wonderful, great time. We were exhausted. We didn't participate, but it was a real community. It was quite wonderful. Some people even had potted plants in front of their motel rooms. It was amazing. But we slept through most of that. I got up at about 4 in the morning and to get coffee, because I was told that coffee would be in the motel office. And I was expecting I'd have to knock on the door and somebody would be half asleep and I'd have to wake them up. It felt terrible. But I got there, and indeed there was a woman running around, being happy as could be, cleaning everything up. By the door to get in there, there was this big box fan that you had to step over. She apologized for that right away. And so, oh, I just made fresh coffee, hon. And she poured a cup of coffee for me and kept talking and walked outside and started sweeping the sidewalk outside. And I kind of walked over the fan again and looked at her and said, how can you be this happy? I just didn't get it. It was 4 in the morning. And she told me. It was a relatively long story, but it comes down to this. She had lived a very difficult life. She was now about my age, and she realized that things probably were not going to change. And so she had 2 choices, she said. One was to complain every day, and one was to open herself up every day to the wonder of being alive on this planet. And she had a broom in one hand, but she made this huge sweep of her hands, of one hand, to show me that right across the street there was a cemetery, and beyond the cemetery there were hills. And that at this moment, the sun was beginning to rise over the hills and over the cemetery. And she said, how can anyone be unhappy at a time like this? Well, I realized that I had encountered the Buddha. And so I asked her for her image and her name, and she refused to give me either because, of course, the Buddha has no name and doesn't really have an image. And so I drank my coffee, and I thanked her for this amazing story, and I went back for more coffee for Anne later. And then I wanted to have Anne come down and meet this woman, but she was already gone. But there it was, my first gift. I had encountered the Buddha in Winnemucca. The next night, we stayed in Salt Lake City. We actually was a wonderful hotel, 5 stories high. They allowed dogs. The first floor, I think, was all dogs and a couple of people. We walked up and down the halls with our dog, and everyone was smiling and happy, and the dogs were happy. It was absolutely wonderful. We were only going as far as Laramie that day because we had met a couple on the way out who owned a small hotel in Laramie, and we wanted to go back there. So we had more time to kind of walk the dog and enjoy our day there, and at least part of our day there in Salt Lake City. And we asked at the front desk where would we go to have a good walk with the dog, and they suggested Liberty Park, which is a beautiful park. I've actually written about it in the newsletter column. It's beautiful, first of all. There are people of every sexual orientation, every race, every nationality there, walking around. It's like heaven. Everyone's smiling, everyone's happy, the kids are playing. It was remarkable. But before we even got there, we encountered another person. We parked the car right across the street from the park. And as we were getting out and taking our dog out and putting her on leash, the man at the house right in front of us motioned us to come up. Well, actually, I thought he was going to tell us that we were parked illegally or something like that. But instead, we walked up, and he told us this was his house, and he asked us to look at the tree, which was so beautiful in front of his house. And, we kind of said, yeah, nice tree. He said, no, you're not looking at this tree. And he pointed out that, well, it looked like the trunk was seamless. In fact, there were 2 distinct halves. There were 2 kinds of bark on the tree. And if you looked up, there were 2 kinds of leaves. He pointed out that these 2 trees had chosen to grow together, to lean on one another. They could have chosen to try to outgrow one another and leave the other dead. They could have chosen to grow in opposite directions, but they chose to grow together. They actually twist a little bit. I have to get one of those. I'm going to get one of that thing. There are too many plosives here for me. Apparently, we keep losing these things. So the tree had grown together and was kind of an image of interdependence. This African-American man who lives in Salt Lake City and who lives right across the street from Liberty Park had shown us a parable of interdependence, and indeed preached, I think, for anybody who wanted to hear a gospel, that we, at our best, grow together and lean upon one another. Okay, night 3 we expected. Night 3 we had already met the people, we enjoyed our stay in Laramie, we saw the same thing again. The 4th night we were coming home, and I admit it was a day when I was very tired. I slept for about 2 hours as Anne was driving into Lincoln. And then I woke up and looked around me. And I asked where we were. I had no idea. It was so verdant, so full of life and beauty and green. And I didn't know Lincoln was like that. How did I ever miss this? Well, and I should point out that western Nebraska and Wyoming and Utah and Nevada are pretty arid. So this was a big shift. But it was beautiful. These are not really the Loess Hills, but there's a deep layer of loess that goes over this entire area. Loess is a certain kind of soil that makes the hills possible and is very fertile. And here we were in something that looked like Eden. It was really lush. I've been to that shrine that many of you have seen on the interstate. I think it's called Holy Family Shrine. It's a beautiful Catholic shrine made almost entirely of glass and a little bit of wood to hold the glass together. And I confess that before this, I've always seen the shrine and thought, what a beautiful structure. Why is it overlooking the freeway and a bunch of farmland? Well, this time I saw it. Because this farmland, this is really Eden. We actually live in Eden. And the fact is, these 3 stories are all about Eden. About the woman who found it in her own life, about the man who preached the gospel of interconnection, and this planet that we share together. I'm going to change the topic slightly from Eden to a related topic, and then we're going to go back again. And my related topic is mindfulness. When we think of mindfulness, I think for the most part, we think of mindfulness meditation because we do that here a lot. We do a moment of silence and we call it mindfulness. But mindfulness is different from meditation. Meditation is a way to attain mindfulness over a period of time. But mindfulness itself is the goal. It's where we try to be in our lives. Mindfulness is to be fully, fully present in our own time and in our own place. To be mindful is not to be thinking again about what happened yesterday and not to be thinking about what's going to happen in the future. To be mindful is to be here and now and keep our attention here and now. To be mindful here in this room is to be aware that we are individuals and at the same time connected one to another, that we're here. And in this moment, we're all here together. And there's also an inner part of mindfulness. It's not just being aware of our outer reality and accepting our outer reality, but it's being aware of who we are as individuals. When I was practicing Zazen, the Zen form of meditation, we were taught to keep our eyes half open and half closed, so that we are both looking at the reality around us and the reality within us. And the reality within is that we're not always who we pretend to be. We don't really always have our lives together. We're imperfect people doing our best, trying to get along, sometimes making mistakes. But mindfulness is accepting ourselves as ordinary people. Realizing we're not special, we're not different from everybody else. We're ordinary. And the thing about mindfulness, accepting our external reality and our internal reality, is that it allows us to see Eden, to see the reality all around us in a very different way. We have work to do as a church community. much work to do as a church community. And the way we do this work best is through mindfulness. Our work is to make real the vision of this nation, the vision that was expressed in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We are called to make real that vision. We are called to make real the vision of peace among nations. We are called to make real the vision of this planet as our Eden. This is our Eden. We need to protect it. We need to be able to pass it on to future generations. And the only way to do this effectively is through mindfulness. If we're not mindful, we're going to pretend that we're better than other people, that we know more than they do. We're going to diminish them and tell them they ought to think the way we think because we have all the answers. If we're not mindful, what we approach all these issues with anger, being angry at the people who voted in our president, who did this and who did that, and think differently from us. We delude ourselves into believing that we're better than others. And so we only continue the divisions in our nations and perhaps make them worse. But mindfulness reminds us that we're just like everybody else. We're imperfect. We make mistakes. We do the best we can. Mindfulness reminds us that we can't create a world of mutual respect by diminishing the views of others. Mindfulness reminds us that we must listen every bit as hard as we speak. And this has always been the liberal religious tradition, always. I want to tell you a little bit about the Universalist Church during the end of slavery, when slavery was being abolished, and all that time that led up to the Civil War. A lot of Universalist churches in the North were in favor of abolition. The churches in the South were much, much more divided. In almost every church in the South, there were some who favored abolition and some who wanted slavery to continue. That was the reality. So how did the church stay connected? They stayed connected by listening, by being respectful, by learning how to say their truth and listen really hard to the other's truth and to say, yes, I hear that. I hear that, and I can affirm this part of your truth, but that other part I really can't. And they kept working at it and working at it, this process of listening and speaking respectfully. They use different words than I do. I want to read from Sylvanus Cobb, who was a Universalist and the founder and editor of the Christian Freeman and Family Visitor. It was a weekly Universalist publication in the first half of the 19th century that addressed largely these issues. And this is what he said was his goal. He called for, and I'm going to quote here, a free, open, frank, ingenuous, fearless, manly Christian investigation of slavery and all subjects involving the rights, duties, interests, and privileges of mankind. He wrote that in 1839. That's our tradition. Respectful communication, mindfulness. Here's the model. Actually, it works in more complicated ways, but here's my simplified model of how it works. Mindfulness, learning to live in our own reality, not pretending to be somewhere else, leads us to accept reality as Edenic, as Eden, as sacred. And once we accept reality, our reality, and the reality of the people around us as Edenic, then we treat one another differently. We treat one another respectfully. And when we do that, we transform the world. So I see it as steps. Now, obviously, it's more complicated. But because I see mindfulness as the first step, I'd like us to begin this church here with a small practice of mindfulness. I'm going to give us a few minutes this time to become aware of who we are and of our surroundings and of who surrounds us, to become aware that we are connected one to another, to become aware that we are each imperfect, even as we reach for that which is good and true, and to remember that Eden is ours and is in us, as much as it was, as it is, in the Buddha I met in Winnemucca, and in the evangelist I met in Salt Lake City. It's in us. Mindfulness is where right action begins. So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to take 3 or 4 minutes, ask us to have 3 or 4 minutes of silence. Then I will once again strike the Buddhist temple bell. Then Pat Will is going to play 3 times the hymn 1048 in your green hymnal called Ubi Caritas. And then after she plays it 3 times, I'm going to ask you to stand and sing it with me 3 times. The words are Ubi Caritas et Amor, Ubi Caritas Deus Ibius, which means where there is compassion and love, there the holy resides. There everything holy is. We begin with a period of silence. Because of those who came before, we are. In spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of the horizon of their visions, we too dream.